Admiral Vexathul stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the stars through the massive viewing window. His ship was called the Dominion's Wrath, and it was bigger than most cities back on his home planet. Around him, 11 other ships just as large moved through space in perfect formation. Each ship carried enough firepower to turn a planet's surface into molten rock. The Admiral's 4 arms moved across the control panels with practiced ease. His scaled green skin caught the light from the ship's displays, and his large black eyes reflected 200 successful battles. In all those fights, not once had he faced real resistance from the primitive species they encountered. "Sir, we are approaching the target system," said Commander Zeltar, his second in command. She held a data pad in her clawed hands. "The planet is called Earth. Our scouts visited it 50 years ago." Vexathul nodded slowly. He remembered the reports from that scouting mission. The humans were barely capable of space travel. They used crude chemical rockets and had only just reached their own moon. Their weapons were simple kinetic projectiles, metal bullets fired by explosive powder. It was almost laughable. "What do we know about their current status?" the Admiral asked. Zeltar read from her pad. "They have achieved basic fusion power and have some small settlements on nearby planets. Our intelligence suggests they have perhaps 100 small ships, mostly for cargo transport. No real military vessels." The Admiral's mandibles clicked together in what his species considered a smile. It was always the same story. These young species would achieve basic space travel, think themselves advanced, and then meet the Kithaeron Empire. The shock on their faces when they realized how small and weak they really were never got old. "Any defensive capabilities?" "Primitive missile systems, some orbital platforms with basic energy weapons, nothing that could penetrate our shields." Zeltar paused. "Sir, there is something strange in the reports." "Strange how?" "There appears to be significant construction activity around their moon and asteroid belt, large-scale mining operations and manufacturing facilities, more than we would expect from such a primitive civilization." Vexathul waved one of his hands dismissively. "Desperate preparations. They probably detected our scouts and are trying to build defenses. It matters little. Their metallurgy is inferior. Their power systems are weak, and they have no understanding of proper shield technology." The bridge crew worked quietly around them. Most of them were veterans of dozens of conquests. They had seen this pattern many times before. A primitive world would hear rumors of the Empire's approach and frantically try to build defenses. Sometimes, they would launch desperate first strikes with whatever weapons they could build. Other times, they would simply surrender immediately. The humans would be no different. "Sir, should we broadcast the standard ultimatum?" asked the communications officer. "Not yet. Let them see us first. Let them understand the futility of resistance." Vexathul turned to study the tactical display. 12 dreadnoughts, each one 5 kilometers long and bristling with plasma cannons. The sight had broken the will of countless species before the first shot was fired. The Kithaeron Empire had been expanding for over 1,000 years. They had conquered hundreds of worlds and absorbed dozens of species into their ranks. Some joined willingly after seeing the Empire's power. Others required more persuasion. But all eventually bowed to the inevitable reality of Kithaeron supremacy. The key was overwhelming force. When a primitive species saw the Empire's fleets, they understood immediately that resistance was pointless. Why fight when you could join the winning side? The Empire offered protection, trade, and technology in exchange for loyalty and tribute. Most species found it a reasonable deal. "Admiral, we're receiving automated signals from the system," reported the sensors officer. "Navigation beacons, traffic control frequencies, standard commercial broadcasts." "Any military communications?" "Nothing we can detect, sir. But..." The officer paused, studying his readings more carefully. "Sir, the energy output from this system is much higher than expected. Our scouts reported primitive fusion reactors, but I'm reading power generation levels consistent with antimatter production. Vexthul frowned. Antimatter technology was not primitive. His own ships used antimatter for their main weapon systems. But the idea that these humans could have developed it in just 50 years was ridiculous. More likely, their instruments were malfunctioning or being fooled by some natural phenomenon. "Run a full diagnostic on the sensor array," he ordered. "Already done, sir. All systems are functioning normally." The Admiral considered this. Perhaps the humans had found some ancient technology left behind by a previous civilization. That would explain the rapid advancement. Many species had been lucky enough to discover such artifacts. It usually made them overconfident. "Any sign of alien technology in their equipment?" he asked. "Negative, sir. The construction signatures and energy patterns appear to be uniquely human design. Crude, but efficient." Commander Zeltar stepped closer to the Admiral. "Sir, should we be concerned? If they have developed antimatter technology, then they have built weapons they do not understand how to use properly," Vexthul interrupted. "Antimatter is dangerous. Most primitive species who discover it destroy themselves within a generation. The fact that these humans are still alive suggests they are being extremely cautious with it." He turned back to the viewing window. In the distance, a yellow star grew brighter as they approached. Somewhere near that star was a blue-green planet full of creatures who thought they were ready to join the galaxy. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "Prepare the standard formation," he commanded. "Triangle assault pattern. I want them to see exactly what they're facing before we give them the chance to surrender." The 12 dreadnoughts shifted into position. Each ship was a masterpiece of Kitharan engineering, with energy shields that could absorb planet-killing amounts of damage and weapons that could crack continents. They moved like predators closing in on prey. Admiral Vexthul had done this so many times that he could predict exactly how it would go. First, shock and fear when the humans detected the fleet. Then, desperate attempts at communication, probably offering some pathetic gesture of friendship. Finally, stunned silence when they heard the terms of surrender. Within a few hours, Earth would be another addition to the Empire's growing collection of tributary worlds. The humans would provide raw materials and labor in exchange for protection and technology. In a few generations, they would consider themselves lucky to be part of something greater than their primitive civilization. It was almost too easy. The Kitharan fleet crossed the asteroid belt in perfect formation. Admiral Vexthul stood at his command post, watching the tactical display as his ships moved toward the inner planets. Everything appeared normal. Small mining platforms dotted the asteroid field, exactly what he would expect from a species learning to harvest space resources. "Sir, we're in broadcast range," announced the communications officer. "Shall I transmit the ultimatum?" Vexthul nodded. This was always his favorite part, the moment when a primitive species realized they were no longer alone in the universe and that they were completely outmatched. "To the inhabitants of the third planet," the message began, "you are now in the presence of the Kitharan Empire's third fleet. Your world has been selected for integration into our greater civilization. Surrender immediately and prepare to receive our representatives. Resistance is futile and will result in the destruction of your infrastructure." The Admiral expected the usual response. Panicked communications between their governments, desperate attempts to negotiate, or sometimes complete silence as they tried to process the reality of first contact. Instead, after only 30 seconds, a reply came back. "Kitharan vessels, this is Earth Defense Command. You are in violation of our territorial space. Stand down immediately and prepare to be boarded for inspection. This is your only warning." The bridge of the Dominion's wrath fell silent. Then Commander Zeltar began to laugh. Soon the entire bridge crew was making the clicking sounds that passed for Kitharan amusement. "Did they just threaten us?" asked the weapons officer, wiping tears from his large black eyes. I believe they did, Vexthul replied, his mandibles clicking rapidly. How refreshing. Usually they at least pretend to be diplomatic first. Sir, should we respond? The communications officer asked, still chuckling. Let them stew for a moment. Sometimes the bold ones need time to realize their mistake. The Admiral studied the tactical display more carefully. His sensors showed normal traffic around the inner planets. Cargo ships moving between Earth and Mars, a few larger vessels near the gas giants that appeared to be fuel tankers. Nothing that looked like a military threat. But something was bothering him. The energy readings from the system were still much higher than they should be, and there were strange gravitational fluctuations near the largest gas giant that his instruments couldn't quite explain. Sensors. What are those readings near Jupiter? He asked. The sensors officer checked his displays twice before answering. Unknown, sir. There appears to be some kind of spatial distortion, but it's unlike anything in our databases. It's not a natural phenomenon. Artificial? Most likely, sir. The patterns suggest controlled gravitational manipulation on a massive scale. Vexthul frowned. Gravity manipulation was advanced technology. Not impossible for a species to develop independently, but unusual for one still using chemical rockets 50 years ago. Could it be a weapon? Unclear, sir. The readings are strange. It's almost like they're creating artificial space-time distortions. Before the Admiral could respond, his sensors officer spoke again, this time with uncertainty in his voice. Sir, the distortion is expanding. On the main display, the space near Jupiter began to ripple like water. The stars beyond seemed to bend and twist as if seen through a massive lens. Energy readings spiked to levels that should have been impossible to contain. Sir, I'm reading massive gravitational waves, reported the sensors officer, his voice tight with concentration. Whatever they're doing is affecting space-time itself. The distortion grew larger, a sphere of twisted reality that was now several hundred kilometers across. Lightning-like discharges of pure energy crackled along its edges, and from its center, something was emerging. At first, it looked like just another piece of space debris, a dark, irregular shape that could have been an asteroid or a damaged space station. But as it fully emerged from the distortion, the Catharan crew realized they were looking at something else entirely. It was a ship, but not like any ship in the Empire's databases. The vessel was enormous, over 1 kilometer long and half as wide. But it looked like it had been built by children playing with scrap metal. Sections of hull plating were obviously salvaged from different sources. Some parts gleamed with fresh metal while others were scarred and blackened. Massive industrial equipment was bolted directly to the outside of the hull. Support struts and antenna arrays stuck out at odd angles. "What in the void is that thing?" Commander Zeltar whispered. The human ship looked like someone had taken a space station, a mining platform, and several cargo vessels, then welded them together without any concern for appearance or proper engineering. It bristled with what appeared to be industrial equipment, cranes, mining lasers, processing plants, and refineries. Nothing about it looked military. "Sir, are we looking at their flagship?" asked the weapons officer. "It's certainly large enough." Admiral Vexthul studied the ugly vessel with professional interest. He had seen desperate species try to convert civilian ships for military use before. Usually it ended badly for them. Civilian ships weren't built for combat. They lacked proper armor, shields, and weapon systems. "Run a full tactical scan," he ordered. "I want to know what weapons that thing carries." The sensors officer worked at his console for several minutes before looking up with confusion. "Sir, I'm not detecting any standard weapon systems. No plasma cannons, no missile tubes, no particle beam arrays." "Nothing?" "Well, there are some strange structures along the hull. They appear to be magnetic acceleration systems. Like the railguns some primitive species use for launching cargo, but they're much larger than anything we've seen before. Vexthul clicked his mandibles in amusement. Railguns, primitive kinetic weapons that fired chunks of metal using magnetic fields. They were essentially high-tech slingshots. Any ship with proper energy shields could ignore them completely. How large? The acceleration chambers are nearly 50 meters long, sir, and there appear to be hundreds of them. The Admiral paused. Hundreds of railguns was unusual, but still not a real threat. Kinetic weapons were only dangerous if they could penetrate shields, and Kitharan energy barriers had never been breached by solid projectiles. Any other weapons? I'm detecting what might be missile launchers, but they're very small. Nothing that could threaten our shields. The communications console chimed with an incoming message. This time, the human voice sounded different, less formal, almost conversational. Kitharan Fleet, this is Captain Sarah Chen, aboard the UES Determination. You have 30 seconds to cut your engines and prepare for boarding. We really prefer to do this the easy way. Commander Zeltar looked at her admiral with disbelief. Sir, they're still threatening us. That flying scrap heap is actually threatening us. Admiral Vexthul had to admire their confidence, even if it was based on complete ignorance. Perhaps these humans would provide more entertainment than usual before they surrendered. Open a channel, he ordered. Let's see if we can educate them about the reality of their situation. Admiral Vexthul activated the communication system and spoke in his most commanding voice. Human vessel, you are addressing Admiral Vexthul of the Kitharan Empire's Third Fleet. You appear to be confused about your situation. The response came immediately, and the human captain sounded almost bored. No confusion here, Admiral. You're trespassing in Earth space with what appears to be a hostile fleet. Standard protocol requires us to inspect your vessels and determine your intentions. Standard protocol? Commander Zeltar muttered. What do they think this is, a customs inspection? The Admiral gestured for silence. Captain Chen, you are speaking to vessels that could reduce your planet to ash within minutes. I suggest you reconsider your position. There was a pause before the human responded. Admiral, I've been watching your ship since you crossed our outer sensor net. 12 dreadnoughts, probably late Kitharan design based on the energy signatures. Standard plasma cannon arrays, multi-layer energy shields, fusion antimatter power plants. Impressive by most standards. Vexthul's eyes narrowed. How did this primitive captain know so much about his ships? Captain Chen continued, her voice remaining calm. Here's the thing, Admiral. We've been studying ships just like yours for 50 years. We know exactly how they work, how they fight, and most importantly, how they break. So I'm going to ask you one more time. Stand down and prepare for boarding. The Admiral had heard enough. These humans needed a demonstration of reality. Target their engines with a surgical plasma strike. Disable but don't destroy. I want prisoners who can negotiate surrender terms. Yes, sir, replied the weapons officer. Selecting target. Plasma cannons charged and ready. Fire. The Dominion's wrath unleashed a focused beam of superheated plasma toward the human ship's rear section. The energy bolt was precisely calculated to disable propulsion systems without causing catastrophic damage. It was a standard intimidation tactic that had worked on hundreds of species. The plasma struck the human vessel's hull with a brilliant flash. Sections of the patchwork armor vaporized instantly, leaving glowing scars across the ship's surface. Atmosphere vented from several breaches, creating clouds of frozen gas around the impact points. Direct hit, sir, reported the weapons officer. Their rear propulsion section took significant damage. Admiral Vexthul nodded with satisfaction. Now the humans would understand their situation. The demonstration had been clear but not fatal. They could still surrender with dignity. But something was wrong. Instead of the expected damage control signals or surrender messages, the human ship continued on its course as if nothing had happened. and the damage they had just inflicted was changing. "Sir," the sensors officer called out, his voice uncertain, "you need to see this." On the main display, the human ship's hull appeared to be moving. The armor plating around the plasma impact sites was shifting and flowing like liquid metal. New sections were growing to fill the damaged areas, while the glowing scars were fading as if they had never existed. "What are we looking at?" demanded Commander Zeltar. "Self-repair systems, sir. Advanced nanotechnology. The ship is literally rebuilding itself." Vex Thul stared at the display in disbelief. Self-repairing hull systems were not primitive technology. His own ships carried emergency nano-repair kits, but nothing on this scale. The human vessel had regenerated massive sections of armor in less than a minute. "Sir, incoming message," announced the communications officer. Captain Chen's voice came through the speakers, and now she sounded disappointed. "Well, that was rude, Admiral, and here I thought we could settle this like civilized beings." Before anyone could respond, the human ship's response began. The first sign was a series of hatches opening along the vessel's hull. Not missile tubes or weapon ports, but large rectangular openings that revealed what looked like industrial equipment inside. Then the railgun systems that had seemed so primitive began to move, turning toward the Catharan fleet with mechanical precision. "Sir, they're targeting us," warned the weapons officer. "With railguns?" Vex Thul almost laughed. "Raise shields to full power. Let them waste their ammunition." The human ship fired. But instead of the primitive metal slugs the Admiral expected, the railguns launched something else entirely. Long, sleek projectiles that accelerated out of the magnetic chambers at speeds that made his sensors struggle to track them. "Tungsten penetrators," reported the sensors officer, his voice rising with alarm. "They're moving at 12% of light speed. 12% of light speed. That was faster than any kinetic weapon in the Empire's arsenal. At that velocity, even a small projectile would carry devastating amounts of kinetic energy, but surely their shields could handle it. The first tungsten rod struck the Pride of Cathera, one of the fleet's smaller dreadnoughts. It hit the ship's energy barrier and kept going as if the shield wasn't there. The rod punched through the hull like it was made of paper, traveling the entire length of the ship before exiting through the stern. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then secondary explosions began rippling through the Pride of Cathara as the tungsten rod's passage destroyed power conduits, weapon systems, and structural supports. The ship broke apart in 3 sections, its atmosphere venting into space along with the bodies of its crew. "Shields had no effect," whispered the weapons officer. "The projectile went right through them." Admiral Vex Thul felt something he hadn't experienced in 200 battles. Fear. Energy shields were designed to deflect plasma bolts and particle beams, not solid matter moving at relativistic speeds. The humans had found a simple but devastating weakness in Kitharan defensive technology. "All ships, evasive maneuvers!" he shouted. "Return fire with everything!" The remaining 11 dreadnoughts opened fire with their full arsenals. Hundreds of plasma bolts streaked toward the human vessel, each one carrying enough energy to level a city. But the human ship was already moving, not with the grace of proper gravitic propulsion, but with the raw power of massive fusion thrusters that sent it sliding sideways through space. Most of the plasma bolts missed entirely. Those that connected struck the ship's hull and were absorbed by the same self-repairing armor that had shrugged off the first attack. The human vessel seemed to be built specifically to absorb energy weapons. "Sir, our plasma cannons are having minimal effect," reported the weapons officer. "Their hull appears to be designed to disperse energy attacks." The human ship fired again. This time, 3 tungsten rods streaked toward 3 different targets simultaneously. The Eternal Conquest tried to use its point defense lasers to intercept the incoming projectiles, but the rods were moving too fast and were too small to track effectively. 2 more dreadnoughts died in explosions of venting atmosphere and twisted metal. "How is this possible?" Commander Zeltar demanded. "They're primitives. They should have chemical rockets and nuclear weapons." Admiral Vexthul watched his fleet begin to die and realized he had made a terrible mistake. These weren't primitives. They had studied the Empire's technology for 50 years and had built something specifically designed to counter it. While the Empire had grown complacent, relying on the same tactics that had worked for centuries, the humans had been preparing for this exact moment. The human ship fired again, and the Admiral knew with cold certainty that his fleet was going to lose. Admiral Vexthul watched 3 more of his ships die in brilliant explosions. The tungsten rods were cutting through his fleet like a blade through soft flesh. Each shot was perfectly aimed, striking critical systems with surgical precision. "All ships, concentrate fire on that vessel," he commanded. "Everything we have." The remaining 8 dreadnoughts turned their weapons toward the human ship and unleashed a coordinated barrage. The space around the enemy vessel filled with plasma bolts, particle beams, and high-energy lasers. It was enough firepower to crack a small moon. The human ship disappeared behind a wall of explosions and energy discharges. Surely nothing could survive that level of destruction. "Direct hits confirmed," reported the weapons officer. "Multiple strikes across the entire hull." But as the energy dissipated, the human vessel emerged from the bombardment seemingly undamaged. Its hull showed scorch marks and glowing areas where the armor had absorbed massive amounts of energy, but the ship itself remained intact and functional. "Impossible," breathed Commander Zeltar. "No armor can absorb that much punishment." The human ship had stopped firing its railguns and was now just sitting there, as if waiting for something. Admiral Vexthul felt a chill run down his spine. What were they planning? "Sir," called the sensors officer, "I'm detecting massive power buildups inside their ship. Energy signatures are off the scale." "Weapons charging?" asked Vexthul. "No, sir. It's something else. The entire ship is opening." On the tactical display, the human vessel began to transform. Sections of hull plating folded back like flower petals, revealing the interior structure. What the Kitharans had assumed was a single ship turned out to be something far more terrifying. The human vessel was a carrier, and it was full of smaller ships. Thousands of launch bays opened across the hull's surface, each one releasing swarms of small craft. But these weren't the fighters or bombers that the Empire's military doctrine anticipated. They were something entirely different. Each craft was about the size of a shuttle, but instead of carrying troops or supplies, they bristled with weapons and sensors. They moved with perfect coordination, accelerating away from their mothership in precise formations that spoke of computer-controlled flight systems. "Drones," whispered the sensors officer. "They're all unmanned." The drones spread out in a cloud around the human carrier, thousands of them forming complex patterns in space. Each one was equipped with miniaturized versions of the railgun technology that had destroyed the first dreadnoughts. Admiral Vexthul realized with growing horror that he wasn't facing a single enemy ship. He was facing a swarm intelligence that could coordinate thousands of individual units in real time. Each drone was both hunter and prey, capable of independent action while remaining part of a larger tactical mind. "Point defense systems, engage all targets," he ordered. The Kitharan ship's defensive weapons came online, filling space with laser fire and small missiles designed to intercept incoming fighters. But the drones weren't following any attack pattern the Empire's computers recognized. Instead of flying straight at their targets, they moved in spiraling, unpredictable paths that made them nearly impossible to track. Worse, they were learning. As the point defense systems fired, the drones analyzed the defensive patterns and adjusted their movements accordingly. What started as random evasion quickly became a precisely choreographed dance that avoided 90% of the incoming fire. The first wave of drones reached the glorious victory, and swarmed around the dreadnought like angry insects. Their small railguns opened fire from dozens of angles simultaneously, targeting the ship's weapon systems, sensors, and engine mounts. Each individual shot was relatively small, but hundreds of them striking at once overwhelmed the ship's armor. The glorious Victory tried to defend itself, its point defense lasers sweeping through the drone swarm. Some of the small craft were destroyed, disappearing in brief flashes of light. But for every drone that died, 3 more took its place, and they learned from the fate of their destroyed companions. "Sir, the glorious Victory is reporting critical damage," came a voice over the communication system. "They've lost main engines and primary weapons." Admiral Vex Thule watched in fascination and terror as the drones completely enveloped the crippled dreadnought. They weren't trying to destroy it quickly. Instead, they were systematically disabling every system, cutting the ship apart piece by piece. "They're not just attacking," observed Commander Zeltar. "They're studying our ships while they destroy them." She was right. The drones were taking their time, learning the layout and capabilities of each vessel they encountered. Every ship they disabled provided information that made them more effective against the next target. A second swarm descended on the Eternal Vigilance. This time, the attack was even more precise. The drones had learned the exact placement of critical systems and focused their fire accordingly. The ship's shields failed within minutes, followed by its weapons and propulsion. "Sir, we need to retreat," urged the weapons officer. "We can't fight this." But retreat wasn't an option. More drones were moving to surround the remaining ships, cutting off escape routes with tactical precision. The human swarm had anticipated their desire to withdraw and was systematically eliminating their options. "Communications. Send a distress signal to Fleet Command," ordered Vex Thule. "Tell them we've encountered a new type of warfare. The humans are not what our reports indicated." "Yes, sir. Signal sent." The Admiral turned back to the tactical display and tried to understand what he was seeing. This wasn't just advanced technology. This was a completely different approach to space combat. Where the Empire relied on powerful individual ships, the humans had created a distributed intelligence that could adapt and learn in real time. Each drone was expendable, but the collective was nearly immortal. Destroying individual units barely affected the swarm's overall capability. It was like trying to fight a storm by shooting at raindrops. "Sir, the humans are broadcasting again," announced the communications officer. Captain Chen's voice filled the bridge once more, still calm and professional. "Admiral Vex Thule, I believe you're beginning to understand your situation. Your ships are individually powerful, but they're designed to fight other ships like themselves. Our drones, on the other hand, were built specifically to counter Kitharan military doctrine." The Admiral found his voice. "How do you know our tactics so well?" "Because we've been studying the wreckage of every ship you've ever destroyed," Chen replied. "Every world you've conquered, every species you've subjugated. They all left records, debris, survivors. We've been collecting that information for 50 years. The truth hit Vex Thule like a physical blow. The humans hadn't developed this technology independently. They had reverse-engineered it from the remains of the Empire's previous victims. Every conquest had provided them with more knowledge, more understanding of how Kitharan ships worked and how to destroy them. "You're saying you learned all this from wreckage?" "Wreckage, survivors, intercepted communications, captured vessels. The Empire has been very thorough in its conquests, Admiral. But you never cleaned up after yourselves. And you never considered that someone might be watching and learning from your methods." Another dreadnought died, its hull cracking open like an egg as the drones found its reactor core. 5 ships left, and the swarm was just getting started. Admiral Vex Thule realized that his Empire's greatest strength had become its greatest weakness. Their consistent, predictable methods had allowed an enemy to study them, understand them, and prepare the perfect counterattack. The hunt was over. Now he was the prey. Admiral Vex Thule watched his fleet die ship by ship. The human drones moved like a living thing, flowing around his vessels and tearing them apart with methodical precision. 5 dreadnoughts remained, then 4, then 3. Each loss taught the swarm something new about Kitharan design weaknesses. "Sir, the Dominion's pride is gone," reported Commander Zeltar. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook as she worked at her console. "The drones are moving toward us." The Admiral looked at the tactical display. Thousands of small craft surrounded his flagship, but they weren't attacking yet. They were waiting, like predators that knew their prey had nowhere to run. "Admiral Vex Thule," came Captain Chen's voice over the communication system, "I'm prepared to accept your surrender now." Surrender? The word tasted bitter in the Admiral's mouth. In 200 battles, he had never even considered the possibility. Kitharan fleets didn't surrender. They won, or they died fighting. But as he watched the last 2 escort ships succumb to the relentless drone assault, he realized that dying here would serve no purpose. His empire needed to know what they faced. Someone had to survive to warn them. "What are your terms?" he asked quietly. "Simple. Cut your engines, lower your shields, and prepare to receive boarding parties. Your crew will be treated according to standard prisoner protocols." Vex Thule looked around his bridge. His officers watched him with a mixture of fear and shame. They had all believed in the Empire's invincibility. Today had shattered that belief completely. "Sir?" prompted Commander Zeltar. The Admiral closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them and gave the order that would end his career and possibly his life. "All ships, stand down. Cut engines and lower shields." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the life support systems. On the tactical display, the remaining 2 dreadnoughts powered down their weapons and defensive systems. The drone swarm moved closer, but held their fire. Within an hour, human boarding craft had docked with all 3 surviving ships. The boarding parties that came through the airlocks were not what Admiral Vex Thule expected. Instead of primitive soldiers with kinetic weapons, he found himself facing humans in advanced powered armor that looked like it belonged in the Empire's own military. The human commander who entered his bridge removed her helmet to reveal a middle-aged woman with graying hair and intelligent eyes. "Admiral, I'm Colonel Martinez, Earth Defense Corps. You and your crew are now prisoners of war." "I demand to speak with your Captain Chen," Vex Thule said. "Captain Chen is busy. She's coordinating with our other battle groups." Other battle groups. The words sent a chill through the Admiral's body. "How many ships do you have?" Colonel Martinez smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Enough." As the human soldiers efficiently processed his crew as prisoners, Admiral Vex Thule found himself in the ship's detention area alongside Commander Zeltar and his senior officers. The holding cell was clean and adequately furnished, but the force field barrier made their situation clear. Through the cell's small window, he could see into space. What he saw there made his blood run cold. More ships were emerging from the gravitational distortion near Jupiter. Not 1 or 2, but dozens. Each one was as large as the vessel that had destroyed his fleet, and all of them looked like they had been built from salvaged materials and industrial equipment. "They're ugly," observed Commander Zeltar, looking out the window. "But effective," replied the Admiral grimly. Captain Chen appeared outside their cell a few hours later. She looked tired but satisfied. "Admiral, I thought you might want to know what happens next." "You're going to invade our territory," he said. It wasn't a question. "Eventually. But first, we're going to visit every world your empire has ever conquered. We're going to offer them the same choice we offered you: surrender or be destroyed." Vexathul frowned. You think they'll surrender to primitives like you? Chen laughed. Admiral, after today, do you still think we're primitives? But no, I don't expect them to surrender immediately. Most of them will probably try to fight just like you did. That's fine. We have time. Time for what? To learn. Every battle teaches us something new. Every ship we capture gives us better understanding of Imperial technology. Every world that joins us voluntarily provides us with more resources and manufacturing capability. The terrible logic of it began to dawn on the Admiral. The humans weren't just planning a war. They were planning a systematic dismantling of everything the Empire had built. You can't possibly defeat the entire Empire, he protested. We have thousands of worlds, millions of ships. We know exactly how many worlds and ships you have, Chen replied calmly. We've been monitoring your communications for decades. We know your supply lines, your fleet dispositions, your manufacturing centers. We know where your shipyards are and how long it takes to build replacement vessels. She activated a holographic display that showed the spiral arm of the galaxy where the Empire held sway. Red dots marked Imperial worlds, while green lines showed trade routes and fleet movements. More importantly, we know which worlds joined you willingly and which were conquered by force. Guess which ones are going to be more enthusiastic about switching sides when our fleets arrive? Admiral Vexathul stared at the display. The Empire controlled hundreds of star systems, but only about a third of them were original Kitharan colonies. The rest had been conquered over the centuries, their populations subjugated, and their resources extracted for the Empire's benefit. You think they'll rebel? Some will. Others will simply refuse to fight for an empire that never cared about them, and a few will actively help us, just like some of the survivors from your previous conquests helped us build these ships. The full scope of the human plan became clear. They weren't just trying to defeat the empire militarily, they were going to dismantle it politically, turning the empire's own conquests against it. How long have you been planning this? 50 years. Chen said. Ever since your scouts first found us. We knew eventually you'd come back with a conquest fleet. So we prepared. She gestured toward the window, where more human ships were visible in the distance. Those vessels were built in shipyards hidden throughout the asteroid belt and outer planets. Every piece of salvaged Imperial technology we could find went into them. Every tactical lesson we learned from studying your methods was incorporated into their design. Commander Zeltar spoke up from her place on the cell's bench. What happens to us? You'll be held as prisoners until the war is over. Assuming you cooperate and provide useful information about Imperial fleet movements and defensive capabilities. Admiral Vexathul felt a mixture of rage and grudging respect for these humans. They had turned the Empire's own systematic approach against them, using the predictability that had been their strength as a weapon. And if we refuse to cooperate? Captain Chen shrugged. Then you sit in cells until this is over. Either way, you're out of the war. She turned to leave, then paused at the cell entrance. Admiral, I want you to understand something. This isn't revenge. This is liberation. Every world your empire conquered deserves the chance to be free again, and every species you subjugated deserves justice. As Chen walked away, Admiral Vexathul settled back against the cell wall and tried to process what he had learned. The Empire's greatest victory, its systematic conquest of hundreds of worlds, had planted the seeds of its own destruction. The humans had simply been the first species clever enough to recognize the pattern and prepare accordingly. Through the window, he watched more human ships emerge from the void, each one representing years of careful planning and preparation. The Empire had created its own nemesis by teaching the galaxy exactly how they operated, and now that nemesis was coming home.